The meeting room at Earth Defense Command was full of the best military people humanity had. Dr. Kevin Walsh stood at the front with big screens showing everything they knew about both alien groups. They did not have much information, but what they had showed two very different ways life had grown. Dr. Walsh started by telling them about the Valtherans. Their home planet was like a perfect garden with great weather and lots of water and soil that could grow anything. There were no big dangerous animals and no bad storms and always enough food and resources. The Valtherans had grown up in a world where working together and solving problems peacefully always worked best. The big screen showed pictures of what Valtherans might look like based on their radio signals. They looked tall and thin with big eyes and soft features. Their whole way of life was built around technology that worked with nature, instead of fighting it. They had made clean energy and good medicine in spaceships without ever needing to make weapons. Captain Ryan Bell raised his hand and asked the question everyone was thinking. If the Valtherans were so smart, why could they not protect themselves from the Krillians? Dr. Walsh said it was not about technology, but about how their minds worked. The Valtherans really could not think about hurting another smart being on purpose. Their brains were just not made for violence at all. The second part of the talk was about what they knew about the Krillians. Their home planet was described in the Valtherans' message as a frozen wasteland where only the strongest could live. The Krillians had grown up as the top hunters who saw the universe as a fight where the winner got everything and the loser died. They saw peaceful species not as equals, but as food. Dr. Walsh showed guesses about Krillian technology based on what the Valtherans had told them. Their ships were made to scare people with huge size and scary looks. Their weapons were built to destroy as much as possible rather than be accurate. Everything about Krillian life was focused on conquering and controlling others. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Gray, who was one of Earth's best battle experts, pointed out something interesting about how the Krillians fought wars. They seemed to use fear and overwhelming force a lot. Every species they had beaten had either given up right away or been crushed by bigger numbers. The Krillians had never fought an enemy that could match how aggressive they were. The real surprise came when Dr. Walsh started explaining humanity's special place in this fight. Earth was officially called a Class 12 death world, which was the highest danger rating in the galaxy classification system. This meant that Earth was more dangerous to live on than almost any other planet that had made smart life. Humans had grown up surviving constant threats that would have killed most other species. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years had forced human ancestors to change or die. Volcano eruptions and earthquakes and floods and storms had shaped human minds to expect disaster and get ready for survival. Hunters, from big cats with long teeth to tiny diseases, had made humans into the best survivors. Major Amy Rodriguez, who would lead the first contact team, asked what this meant for the mission they were planning. Dr. Walsh explained that humans were probably the first species the Krillians would meet that was more dangerous than they were. Humans had not just survived their dangerous world, but had learned to do well on it by becoming the best hunters in Earth's history. But there was something else that made humans special. Even though they had grown up as deadly hunters, humans had also made complex moral systems and could show mercy to beaten enemies. They could fight with amazing fierceness when they had to, but they could also stop fighting when the threat was gone. This mix of deadly ability and moral control was almost unknown in the galaxy. Captain Danny Torres, who would command the UEN Valkyrie, wanted to know more about human advantages over the Krillians. Dr. Walsh talked about humanity's war history and pointed out that humans had been making the art of war better for thousands of years. Every major human civilization had made sophisticated military tactics and strategies. The Krillians fought like hunters with overwhelming force and brutal directness. Humans fought like smart top hunters who had learned from millions of years of competition. Human military thinking included ideas like deception and sacrifice and coordinated attacks and strategic thinking that went far beyond simple aggression. General Patricia Stone asked about the technology differences between human and Krillian equipment. Dr. Walsh admitted that the Krillians probably had more ships and their ships were bigger than human ships. However, human technology was made by engineers who understood that survival often depended on working well and being reliable rather than just having raw power. The talk turned to human mental advantages. Dr. Kevin Walsh explained that humans had grown up with something called persistence hunting. Ancient humans could follow prey for days or weeks until the animal fell down from being too tired. This gave modern humans an amazing ability to focus on long-term goals and keep fighting, even when things seemed hopeless. Lieutenant Chris Powell, who would lead spy missions, brought up another human advantage. Humans were pack hunters who had learned to coordinate complex group actions. They could give up individual advantages for group success in ways that purely hunting species often could not understand. This made human military units incredibly good at working together. The meeting ended with Dr. Walsh explaining why Operation Righteous Fury was probably humanity's best chance to make itself a major galactic power. If humans could successfully protect the Valthorans from the Krillians, other peaceful species would seek human protection. If humans failed, the Krillians would eventually reach human space and the war would be fought around Earth's colonies. Admiral Helen Brooks stood up and spoke to the assembled officers. She reminded them that they were not just going to fight an alien war, but to represent humanity to the galaxy for the first time. The way they acted would determine how other species saw humans for generations to come. The mission would launch in 72 hours. The UEN Valkyrie and her escort fleet represented the most advanced military force humanity had ever put together. Every ship had weapons made by a species that understood both the need for violence and the importance of using it responsibly. As the officers left the meeting room to start their preparations, Dr. Walsh stayed behind to study the data one more time. He could not shake the feeling that humanity was about to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Krillians had built their empire by hunting peaceful species who could not fight back. They were about to find out what happened when they met a species that could fight better than they could, and the next few weeks would decide whether humanity would become the galaxy's protector or just another conquered species. Either way, the universe was about to learn what it meant that Earth was a death world, and humans were its best survivors. The alarm bells rang through the Earth Deep Space Monitoring Station at exactly 3:47 in the morning on Tuesday. Commander Jake Morrison rolled out of his bed and rushed to the main control room where dozens of workers were looking at their screens with wide eyes. The big displays showed something that had never appeared before in human history, a signal from deep space that was clearly made by someone smart and clearly not natural. Dr. Lisa Carter was already at her work area running the signal. Through every translation program humans had ever made, her fingers moved fast across the keyboard as she tried to understand the strange patterns flowing across her screen. The signal was coming from a star system nearly 40 light-years away, much further than any human had ever traveled. Jake stood behind Lisa and watched the data flow. The signal was different from anything they had seen before. It was not random noise from space or simple radio waves from a distant star. This was complex and had layers and was done on purpose. Someone or something was trying to talk to them. Lisa looked up at Jake with excitement in her eyes. She had been working on alien communication ideas for 15 years, and this was the moment she had dreamed about. The first real proof that humans were not alone in the universe was flowing through her computers right now. The translation programs began to show results after 3 hours of work. The signal was a language, but unlike any human language. It had patterns that showed intelligence, but the structure was completely alien. Lisa worked with her team to build new translation methods based on math ideas that any smart species would understand. Admiral Helen Brooks arrived at the station 6 hours after the signal was first found. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, who had commanded Earth's defense forces for the past 10 years. She walked into the control room and right away demanded a full briefing on what they had found. Jake explained that the EE signal was definitely from a smart alien species and that Dr. Carter was making progress on translation. The signal was being sent on multiple frequencies and seemed to be repeating the same message over and over again. Whatever was sending it wanted to make sure someone would hear it. Lisa finally made the breakthrough after 12 hours of continuous work. The aliens were using prime numbers and basic physics equations as a foundation for their language. Once she understood this pattern, the rest of the message began to make sense. What she translated made everyone in the room go silent. The message was a desperate plea for help. The aliens called themselves the Valtharans and they were dying. Their world was under attack by something called the Krillian Empire. The Valtharans explained that they were a peaceful species who had never developed weapons or armies. They did not know how to fight and they were being killed. The message described the Krillians as conquerors who traveled from world to world taking everything they wanted. They enslaved peaceful species and stripped planets of all resources before moving on to find new victims. The Valtherans had watched 12 other civilizations fall to the Krillians, and they knew their world would be next. Lisa continued translating as more details came from the signal. The Valtherans were asking any species who knew how to fight to please help them. They offered to share all their knowledge and technology in exchange for protection from the Krillians. They explained that they had developed amazing biotechnology and clean energy systems, but none of it could save them from an enemy that wanted to destroy them. The most frightening part of the message came near the end. The Valtherans estimated they had perhaps 3 weeks before the Krillian fleet would finish surrounding their planet. After that, the systematic harvesting of their civilization would begin. Billions of innocent beings would die or be enslaved unless someone came to help them. Admiral Brooks called an emergency meeting of the United Earth Defense Council within hours of receiving the full translation. Representatives from every major nation gathered in the secure conference room beneath Geneva. The debate that followed would determine not just Earth's response but humanity's first steps into galactic politics. Some council members argued that Earth had no obligation to help unknown aliens in a distant star system. The journey would take weeks even with humanity's fastest ships, and there was no guarantee they could do anything to help. Earth's military was designed to protect human colonies, not fight alien wars. Others pointed out that if the Krillians were really conquering species after species, they would eventually reach human space. It would be better to fight them now while they were busy with the Valtherans than to wait for them to arrive at Earth's doorstep. The enemy of humanity's potential friend could easily become humanity's enemy. Dr. Kevin Walsh, Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien biology, provided crucial insight during the debate. Based on the Valtherans' message, they had evolved on a world with no predators and abundant resources. They literally could not understand concepts like war or violence. The Krillians, however, seemed to be the exact opposite, a species that saw violence as natural and conquest as their right. Captain Ryan Bell, a veteran of the brutal Mars colonial wars, made the observation that changed everything. He stood up in the council chamber and reminded everyone that Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Humans had evolved surviving ice ages, volcanic eruptions, diseases, predators, and constant competition for limited resources. Every human instinct was shaped by the threat of death. The room fell silent as everyone realized what Ryan was saying. If the Valtherans could not fight and the Krillians only knew brutal conquest, then humanity might be exactly what this situation needed. Humans understood both the necessity of violence and the importance of controlling it. They could fight when fighting was needed, but they could also show mercy when the battle was won. General Patricia Stone, the head of Earth's military forces, spoke the words that would launch humanity into its first interstellar war. She authorized Operation Righteous Fury and ordered the immediate deployment of Earth's most advanced battle fleet. The UN Valkyrie and her escort ships would travel to the Valtheran star system and assess the situation. The mission parameters were simple but decisive. If the Valtherans' claims proved accurate, and the Krillians were really the monsters described in the message, then humanity would eliminate the threat completely. There would be no negotiations with genocidal conquerors and no mercy for those who preyed on peaceful civilizations. As the council meeting ended and preparations began for humanity's first interstellar military deployment, nobody fully understood how much this decision would change everything. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone sent a distress call to a planet full of Deathworlders. The UN Valkyrie came out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and right away started looking for dangers. Captain Danny Torres stood on the bridge watching the screen's update with new information. What they found was worse than anyone had thought it would be. The Krillian fleet was huge. Over 200 ships of different sizes surrounded the Valtherans' homeworld in a perfect blocking formation. The biggest ships were kilometers long and covered with weapons made for bombing planets. Smaller ships moved between the surface and the fleet, like bugs carrying away pieces of a dead animal. Lieutenant Commander Susan Gray ran detailed scans of the Krillian ships and told Captain Torres what she found. The alien ships were built to scare people as much as to work. They had sharp edges and dark hulls and weapon groups that looked like the teeth of some huge monster. Everything about how they looked was meant to make fear in anyone who saw them. The Valthran's world was surrounded by a cloud of broken pieces that had once been their orbital defense stations. The peaceful aliens had built beautiful space homes that used living plants and flowing water to make artificial ecosystems. All of it had been destroyed in the first hours of the Krillian attack. Major Amy Rodriguez got her first contact team ready, while the Valkyrie stayed hidden behind one of the system's outer planets. The plan was to reach the surface using stealth shuttles and make contact with Valthran's leaders before showing the full human fleet. They needed to confirm the alien story and check the situation before committing to battle. The shuttle trip to the surface was scary. Krillian patrol ships moved through the system in random patterns, forcing the human pilots to take a long route through the asteroid belt. When they finally reached the planet's atmosphere, they could see the destruction the Krillians had already caused. Huge strip mining operations had carved ugly scars across the continents. Whole forests had been harvested and beautiful cities had been turned into smoking ruins. The Krillians were not just conquering the Valtharans, they were systematically destroying everything the peaceful species had built over thousands of years. Major Rodriguez and her team landed near one of the underground shelters where the surviving Valtharans had taken refuge. The first sight of real aliens was shocking even for trained soldiers. The Valtharans were tall and graceful with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold endless sadness. Elder Thalen, who spoke for the surviving Valtharans, greeted the humans with a mix of hope and confusion. He explained through translation devices that they had never seen beings like humans before. The Valtharans could sense that humans were predators, but they could not understand how predators could also be protectors. The talk that followed showed the true scope of the tragedy. The Valtharans had a population of over 8 billion before the Krillian attack began. In just 2 weeks, that number had been cut to less than half. The Krillians were not just killing Valtharans, they were picking the strongest and most intelligent for slavery. While getting rid of the rest, Elder Thalen showed Major Rodriguez records of the 12 other worlds the Krillians had conquered. Each planet had been home to a peaceful species that had developed art and science and beautiful civilizations. All of them were now empty wastelands stripped of everything valuable. Billions of intelligent beings had been reduced to numbers in Krillian resource databases. The humans learned that the Valtharans actually had technology that could have defended their world. Their biotechnology was incredibly advanced, and they had developed energy shields and defensive systems that could have stopped the Krillian assault. The problem was that using these defenses would have required them to hurt the attackers, something their psychology made impossible. Lieutenant Chris Powell led a reconnaissance team to gather intelligence on Krillian operations. What they found in the conquered cities made even hardened soldiers sick with anger. The Krillians had set up processing centers where captured Valtharans were sorted like livestock. The strong were marked for slavery, the intelligent were marked for forced labor, and everyone else was killed. The Krillian soldiers themselves were massive reptilian creatures with armor like scales and predatory features. They moved through the ruined cities like sharks through bloody water, taking whatever they wanted and destroying everything else. Their behavior suggested they saw the Valtharans as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Back in orbit, Captain Torres made contact with the Krillian fleet commander. War Master Vexkar appeared on the communications screen as a terrifying figure, with scarred features and eyes that held no trace of mercy. His voice was filled with arrogance as he demanded to know why humans had entered his hunting ground. The conversation that followed revealed everything the humans needed to know about Krillian psychology. Vexkar dismissed humanity as just another prey species and ordered them to leave immediately. When Captain Torres suggested that the Krillians withdraw and leave the Valtharans in peace, the alien War Master laughed with genuine amusement. Vexkar explained that the Krillian Empire had conquered over 50 species and destroyed countless civilizations. He described the process with pride, explaining how they studied each species to find the most efficient ways to break their resistance. Peaceful species like the Valtharans were his favorite targets because they provided no real challenge. The Krillian War Master made it clear that he saw humans as potential slaves or enemies, but not as equals. He gave Captain Torres 1 hour to leave the system, or face the same fate as every other species that had tried to interfere with Krillian operations. The transmission ended with Vexkar ordering his fleet to prepare for another easy conquest. Captain Torres called a meeting with all his senior officers to decide humanity's course of action. The evidence was overwhelming. The Krillians were exactly the monsters the Valthorans had described. They were genocidal conquerors who saw peaceful species as prey and violence as the only meaningful form of communication. Major Rodriguez reported that the Valthorans were not exaggerating their helplessness. Despite having advanced technology, they were psychologically incapable of fighting back. Their entire species had evolved to solve problems through cooperation, and they literally could not conceive of deliberately harming another intelligent being. The tactical situation was challenging but not impossible. The Krillian fleet was large, but their ships appeared to be designed for intimidation rather than efficiency. Human vessels were smaller but built with military precision by engineers who understood that battles were won through superior tactics rather than superior size. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Gray presented her analysis of Krillian weaknesses. Their fleet formation was designed to prevent escape rather than defend against attack. They had positioned their largest ships around the planet but left their flanks exposed. Most importantly, their communication suggested they had never faced an enemy that could match their aggression. Captain Torres made the decision that would change galactic history. He activated Operation Righteous Fury and ordered the human fleet to move into attack position. The Krillians had made their choice when they dismissed humanity as prey. Now they would learn what happened when prey species evolved on Deathworlds. The message Captain Torres sent to Earth was simple, but decisive. The situation was exactly as the Valthorans had described. The Krillians were genocidal monsters who preyed on peaceful civilizations. Humanity would eliminate this threat completely and ensure that no other species would suffer the same fate. As the human fleet prepared for battle, Elder Thalen asked Major Rodriguez a question that would haunt her for years. He wanted to know how humans could be so gentle with the Valthorans, but so ready to fight the Krillians. Her answer captured the essence of what made humanity unique in the galaxy. Humans had learned that sometimes the only way to protect innocent life was to destroy those who would take it. They could show mercy because they could also show strength. The Krillians were about to discover that their reign of terror had finally encountered a species that could end it forever. The battle started when War Master Vexkar told his fleet to show Krillian power by destroying the small human force. The alien commander expected the humans to run away like every other species had when faced with Krillian might. Instead, the UN Valkyrie and her escort ships moved into attack formation with the precision of a military force that had been getting ready for war since the beginning of civilization. Captain Danny Torres stood on the bridge, watching the screens as Krillian ships moved to surround his fleet. The alien ships were huge and threatening, but their movements showed something important. They were not acting like a military force, they were acting like predators surrounding prey. The Krillians had never learned to fight an enemy that could fight back. The first Krillian attack came as expected. Huge battleships opened fire with weapons made to break planetary defenses and break enemy morale. The energy beams and projectile weapons filled space with destructive force that had crushed dozens of other civilizations. Against human ships, the attack did almost nothing. Human military technology was built by engineers who understood that survival depended on efficiency rather than intimidation. The Valkyrie's defensive systems had been made to protect against the worst that a death world could throw at human colonies. Krillian weapons were powerful, but they were also crude and wasteful compared to human standards. Lieutenant Commander Susan Gray coordinated the fleet's defensive response with the calm efficiency of someone who had trained for this moment her entire career. Human ships moved in coordinated patterns that confused the Krillians, who were used to enemies that either fled or stayed in one place to be destroyed. The humans were doing neither. Colonel Marcus Webb led the fighter squadrons in the first phase of the counterattack. Human fighters were small and fast, with pilots who had been trained to think of their ships as extensions of their own bodies. They moved through the Krillian formation like predators hunting, much larger prey striking at weak points and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The Krillian pilots tried to match human tactics, but they lacked the fundamental understanding of three-dimensional combat that humans had developed. Krillian ships were built for straight-line attacks against stationary targets. When faced with enemies that could outmaneuver them, the alien pilots became confused and started making mistakes. Captain Torres watched the battle develop and realized that the Krillians had a fatal weakness. They had built their entire military doctrine around overwhelming weaker enemies. They had no protocols for fighting an enemy that was stronger than they were. Every time human ships outfought Krillian vessels, the alien formation became more disorganized. The turning point came when human ships demonstrated tactics that the Krillians had never seen before. Lieutenant Sarah Walsh led a squadron in a coordinated suicide run against one of the massive Krillian battleships. The human pilots flew their fighters directly into the enemy ships, weapon ports destroying themselves but crippling the much larger vessel. War Master Vexkar watched in disbelief as his supposedly superior forces began to fall to the smaller human fleet. The Krillian commander had conquered 50 species and destroyed countless civilizations, but he had never faced an enemy that was willing to die to achieve victory. Human tactics required a level of sacrifice and coordination that predatory species could not understand. The space battle became a systematic dismantling of Krillian military power. Human ships used their superior maneuverability to pick apart the alien formation one vessel at a time. When Krillian ships tried to retreat, human fighters pursued them with the relentless determination of persistence. Hunters who could track prey across vast distances, Major Amy Rodriguez listened to intercepted Krillian communications and heard something that had never been recorded in their previous conquests. The aliens were expressing fear. For the first time in their history, the Krillians were facing an enemy that they could not intimidate or overwhelm. The predators were becoming prey. The most devastating human tactic was something the Krillians could not counter. Human ships fought as coordinated units where individual vessels would sacrifice themselves to protect the larger formation. This required a level of group loyalty and tactical thinking that the individualistic Krillians could not match or understand. Captain Danny Torres opened communications with War Master Vexkar as the Krillian fleet began to collapse. The alien commander's arrogance had been replaced by something approaching panic. He demanded to know what kind of species humanity was and why they fought with such ferocity. Torres gave him an answer that the Krillian would never forget. Humans were the product of a death world that had spent millions of years teaching them to survive by becoming the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. But unlike the Krillians, humans had learned to control their predatory instincts and use them only when necessary. They fought not because they enjoyed killing, but because others needed to be protected from those who did. The psychological impact of this revelation broke what remained of Krillian resistance. The aliens had built their entire identity around being the ultimate predators who conquered weaker species. Learning that they were not even the most dangerous predators in the galaxy destroyed their will to fight more effectively than any weapon. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb reported that the surviving Krillian ships were attempting to flee the system. Captain Torres ordered pursuit with instructions to disable rather than destroy the fleeing vessels. The humans wanted prisoners who could provide intelligence about the Krillian Empire and evidence of their crimes against peaceful species. The battle ended with the complete destruction of Krillian military power in the system. Over 200 alien ships had been reduced to scattered debris or captured vessels. The human fleet had taken minimal casualties despite being outnumbered 10-1. The victory was so complete that it would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Dr. Kevin Walsh analyzed the battle data and made an observation that explained humanity's overwhelming success. The Krillians fought like animals with instinct and aggression, but without real strategy. Humans fought like intelligent predators who had learned from millions of years of competition with other dangerous species. The most important discovery came from interrogating captured Krillian officers. The aliens revealed that they had never encountered organized resistance to their conquests. Every species they had fought had either surrendered immediately or been crushed by superior numbers. They had no experience with enemies that could match their aggression and exceed their tactical abilities. War Master Vexkar, captured when his flagship was disabled, could not understand how he had been defeated. In his final conversation with Captain Torres, the alien kept asking how humans could be so peaceful in negotiations, but so terrible in war. Torres explained something that the Krillian could not grasp. Humans fought not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The news of the Krillian defeat spread through their empire faster than human ships could travel. For the first time in generations, species that lived in fear of Krillian raids began to hope that someone might be able to protect them. The galaxy was learning that the predators who had terrorized peaceful civilizations for centuries had finally met their match. As the last Krillian ship was captured or destroyed, Captain Torres received a message from Elder Thalen on the planet below. The Violtharans were emerging from their shelters to see a sky free of enemy ships for the first time in months. They could not understand how such a small human force had defeated the mighty Krillian fleet, but they were grateful beyond words. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The Krillian Empire would not ignore the destruction of an entire fleet, and humanity had just announced its presence to a galaxy full of species who would want to test the newcomers. Earth's children had proven they could protect peaceful civilizations, but now they would have to prove they could do it consistently. The destruction of the Krillian fleet was only the beginning of the real challenge. As human ships moved into orbit around the Violtharans' homeworld, Captain Danny Torres realized that defeating the enemy in space had been the easy part. The Krillians still controlled the surface of the planet with thousands of ground troops and millions of Violtharans held as hostages. War Master Vexkar, now a prisoner aboard the UN Valkyrie, sent a final message to his remaining forces on the planet below. If he could not claim victory, he would at least deny it to the humans. The surviving Krillian commanders received orders to kill as many Violtharans as possible before the human ground forces could reach them. Sergeant Alex Kane led the first wave of human soldiers to the planet's surface using drop pods that could penetrate the atmosphere faster than Krillian defenses could track them. What the humans found in the conquered cities was worse than the orbital bombardment had suggested. The Krillians had turned Violtharans' population centers into concentration camps where systematic extermination was already underway. The ground war that followed showcased the deadliest aspect of human nature, their ability to apply exactly the right amount of force to achieve their objectives. Unlike the Krillians, who relied on overwhelming brutality, human soldiers could fight with surgical precision that saved innocent lives while eliminating threats. Major Beth Collins coordinated rescue operations in the largest Violtharan city, while human soldiers fought street by street to eliminate Krillian resistance. The aliens had expected human ground forces to be as crude as their own troops, but human soldiers moved like predators who had learned to hunt in packs over millions of years of evolution. The Krillians discovered that humans could be far more terrifying than any predatory species they had encountered. Human soldiers did not just kill enemies, they outthought them, outmaneuvered them, and eliminated them, with an efficiency that bordered on artistic. The aliens who had terrorized peaceful species for generations found themselves being hunted by something far more dangerous. Lieutenant Commander Susan Gray established a command center in the ruins of the Violtharans' capital city, and began coordinating the liberation of processing centers where captured aliens were being held. The scenes her teams discovered would haunt human soldiers for years. The Krillians had been systematically sorting Violtharans like livestock, keeping the useful ones alive while disposing of the rest. Dr. Nancy Hill arrived with the second wave of human forces and immediately began working with Violtharan scientists to understand their biotechnology. What she discovered changed her understanding of both species and offered hope for the future. The Violtharans had not always been helpless. They had deliberately evolved themselves to remove violent tendencies. The genetic analysis revealed that ancient Violtharans had possessed the capacity for aggression and self-defense. Over thousands of generations, they had used their advanced biotechnology to selectively breed these traits out of their population. They had created a truly peaceful species by removing their ability to harm others, but this had also removed their ability to protect themselves. Elder Thalen worked with Dr. Hill to explain Violtharan's history and their hopes for the future. The peaceful aliens had achieved something that no other species had managed. They had eliminated war violence and aggression from their civilization. The price had been vulnerability to predatory species like the Krillians, but they had believed it was worth it. The rescue operations revealed the true scope of Krillian atrocities. Sergeant Alex Kane's teams found detailed records that the aliens had kept of their conquests. The Krillians treated the destruction of entire civilizations as an art form, carefully documenting how they had broken the resistance of 50 different species. Each conquered world had followed the same pattern. The Krillians would arrive with overwhelming force and demand immediate surrender. Species that submitted were enslaved and their world stripped of resources. Species that resisted were exterminated as examples to others. The peaceful nature of most galactic civilizations had made Krillian conquest almost effortless. Major Amy Rodriguez interrogated captured Krillian officers and learned something that explained their complete defeat at human hands. The aliens had built their entire military doctrine around fighting enemies who either fled or defended static positions. They had no experience with enemies who actively sought to destroy them rather than just survive their attacks. The psychological impact of facing humans had broken Krillian morale more completely than any weapon. The aliens were discovering that they were not the ultimate predators they had believed themselves to be. In a galaxy where most species were peaceful herbivores, the Krillians had been apex predators. Against humans, they were just another prey species. Captain Torres established a temporary military government to coordinate the liberation of the Valtherans' world, while human engineers worked to repair the damage caused by Krillian strip mining operations. The peaceful aliens watched in amazement as human soldiers transformed from deadly warriors into protective guardians within hours of victory. The most significant discovery came when Dr. Nancy Hill realized that Valtherans' biotechnology could be combined with human tactical knowledge to create defensive systems that would protect peaceful species throughout the galaxy. The aliens had the scientific knowledge to build amazing defenses, but they lacked the psychological framework to use them against attackers. Elder Thalen proposed an alliance that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Valtherans would share their advanced biotechnology and scientific knowledge with humanity. In exchange, humans would provide military protection and help design defensive systems that could operate without requiring peaceful species to become killers themselves. The interrogation of War Master Vexkar provided crucial intelligence about the broader Krillian Empire. The defeated commander revealed that his fleet had been just one of dozens operating throughout the galaxy. The destruction of his force would be seen as a temporary setback unless humanity could demonstrate that it was capable of protecting other threatened species. Captain Torres sent a message to Earth requesting immediate reinforcements and authorization to expand operations against other Krillian fleets. The battle for the Valtherans' world had proven that humans could defeat the aliens in direct combat, but eliminating the entire Krillian threat would require a sustained campaign across multiple star systems. The response from Admiral Helen Brooks was swift and decisive. Earth would commit whatever resources were necessary to eliminate the Krillian Empire completely. Humanity had learned that allowing genocidal predators to continue operating would eventually threaten human colonies. The war would continue until every Krillian fleet was destroyed or surrendered. As news of the human victory spread across the galaxy through Valtherans' communication networks, other species began reaching out with requests for protection or offers of alliance. Some offered advanced technology in exchange for military protection. Others warned that humanity's emergence as a galactic power had upset the balance that had existed for thousands of years. Dr. Kevin Walsh analyzed the long-term implications of humanity's intervention and realized that everything had changed. The galaxy had been dominated by a few predatory species who preyed on many peaceful civilizations. Humanity's arrival offered peaceful species their first real hope for protection, but it also meant that predatory species would eventually unite against the human threat. The final scene of the liberation showed Elder Thalen standing with Major Rodriguez in the ruins of his world's capital city. The Valtherans' leader struggled to understand how humans could be so violent in war, but so gentle in peace. Rodriguez explained that humans had learned something that most species never discovered: when to fight and when to show mercy. Elder Thalen's response captured the new reality that humanity had created in the galaxy. He told Rodriguez that the Valtherans had called for warriors to save them, and the universe had sent humans. They had not known there was a difference between warriors and killers, but now they understood that humans were protectors rather than predators. The liberation of the Valtherans' world was complete, but it marked the beginning of humanity's role as the galaxy's guardian. Other peaceful species would need protection, other predatory empires would need to be stopped, and humanity would need to prove that a species could be both deadly and merciful. The children of Earth had announced their presence to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same.